For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today. Today on the show, I've got Doug Zarkin, CMO of Pearle Visions. Doug joined Luxottica in 2012 as the VP and Chief Marketing Officer for Pearle Visions. In 2015 and again in 2016, Doug and his team were recognized with an Effie for Marketing Excellence in Healthcare Services. They were recently honored with a Silver Clio for the brand's Small Moments Equity campaign. Before Pearle Visions, Doug led creative services, brand development, and brand marketing for Avon's global upscale young women's brand, Mark. And before that, led Victoria's Secret Pink from a test market to $400 million in sales. On the show today, we talk about retail and how it's not dead, and that's just a stupid idea. And we also talk about this blending of art and science and how to find that balance as a marketer and balancing what we're calling neighborhood versus national marketing efforts. I hope you enjoy the show. Well, Doug, welcome to the show.
Alan, thanks for having me, and all those folks that are listening, thank you for taking the time.
It should be a great conversation, but before we get started, I want to start off talking about you. So I'm curious, I love this question. Is there an experience in your past that you think defines or makes up who you've become?
It's interesting. When I think back over the journey of my career and the passion that I have to make a difference as a person, not only as a leader, but as an individual, I think a defining moment was my senior year in high school, actually. I was one of those kids that really didn't open a book in high school and still managed to pull, high 80s, low 90s, and applied to about 6 or 7 colleges, and very quickly realized that not really fully applying yourself wasn't going to work. As my friends were getting accepted to the colleges of their choice, I found myself not getting in. And it was sort of a wake-up call that, if you want to be successful and you want to make a difference, you've really got to apply yourself. And so I was thrilled to be able to go to George Washington University for my undergrad, but it wasn't my first choice. And I think I entered the world of academia and my career with a bit of a chip on my shoulder because of it, because I had let myself down and really didn't deliver on what my full potential was.
It's a good lesson. It's a really good lesson to learn, especially that early. What fuels you? What drives you? Why do you get up in the morning every day, do what you do?
I ascribe to the belief that you work to live, not live to work. But while I'm in the office, while I am representing the brand that I am a part of, it's really the ability to make a difference as Doug. Put what's on my business card or on my CV aside. Just the opportunity to bring thinking, to bring passion, to bring an intense curiosity to whatever business or brand that I'm leading. That ability to make a difference and have an impact on the trajectory of the organization that I'm a part of is really what drives me every day.
That's great. So you're currently the CMO at Pearle Visions, but I hear, and we've talked about some of your more interesting jobs in the past, and I know your job now is interesting, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah,
so I was wondering if you could give me a little list of those, because I found them extremely interesting.
Actually, the most exciting job I have in life is being a husband and a father to 2 kids, and I have a little girl and a little boy. And I believe I'm uniquely qualified to be the father of a little girl, having been an Avon lady and worked in the intimates world for a number of years. When I was at Avon, I was part of the team that launched the Mark brand, which was really reinventing the direct selling model, bringing in an entire new generation of young women to not only buy the product, but sell. And then obviously as the head of marketing for Victoria's Secret Pink, I'm uniquely in touch with my feminine side, which I don't know if that well rounds me or not, but what it sure is an interesting conversation piece when going out to dinner with other couples. And for me, at least, it reminded me every day in what I do now that it's not necessarily about what I think. It's really about the ability to sort of step outside yourself and be a great listener, to really understand what a consumer that you're looking to reach is saying, but most importantly, what they're not saying, but what they really need.
Right. I love that you've really gotten to know each of those businesses. I can't get this image out of my head. I don't know if you remember this movie with Mel Gibson.
Oh, well, Women Want. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yes. It's funny. My first year at Avon was the year the movie came out. And so a couple of the sales reps that we did business with thought it would be pretty funny to send me movie posters. So I had a number of those. And no, I did not put on pantyhose like Mel Gibson did in the movie. I will plead the fifth in terms of looking at shades of lip gloss and mascara. I will plead the fifth, but I will tell you that the philosophy that movie was sort of characterizing is very much true, which is to be successful in any industry where you're trying to motivate a consumer to take action, you really have to try to get into their mind in order to eventually figure out how to motivate them in a way that you want to.
You've been in a couple retail businesses. You're in one now with Pearle Vision. Retail, there's all these headlines you see, retail is dying, the death of retail. Why is that? Because people are still going to stores, maybe not as in the numbers that they used to, but they're still going to stores. Why is that?
I think when I hear that statement falls somewhere on the spectrum between dumb and stupid. Retail is not dead. Bad retail is dead. And it's something that I've been saying for about 2 years. I was at the CES show about 2 years ago speaking on a panel, and somebody was talking about how Amazon is a retail killer. It isn't. What Amazon is basically a mirror that every brand who is doing a mediocre job meeting the emotional and rational needs of a consumer need to be looking at themselves through. And rightfully so. It used to be you could open up a location, throw some product in, and make some money. This marketplace, consumers essentially have raised the bar on what they expect. They expect value. Value is a very simple equation, at least in my mind. Value equals experience divided by price. You deliver an amazing experience, you can charge a nice amount of money. You deliver a mediocre, or dare I say crappy experience, you better be doing buy one, get one free, 3 for $25, because frankly, there is no reason to believe that they should go there versus going and buying through Amazon.
Mm-hmm. What do you think retailers should be doing? Change that value equation.
I think retailers have to invest in the single most important vehicle that they have at their disposal, and that is people. And I'm not talking just about acquiring and retaining talent in leadership positions like mine. What I'm talking about is really investing in your frontline associates. They are three-dimensional, or I should say four-dimensional representations of your brand promise. Training, education, associate retention. Those are all things that come when a company decides to make an investment in the people that represent their brand every single day. It's amazing when you walk into a brick and mortar location and you actually see somebody who loves what they do. Go to a restaurant. Get served by somebody who actually is a professional waiter, who loves to be in that industry. The experience is second to none. And then go to a fast food destination of your choice and see somebody who's just punching a clock. Compare the experiences. Look at the price-value equation and ask yourself, who's really making a difference? It doesn't have to be sophisticated retail or high-value retail to deliver a high-value experience. But I would say that, if I was leading a brand or a business, the first investment I would make is in our training and our talent retention at the front line.
So living that happy employees, happy customers mantra.
Valued employees, value.
Okay.
Because there's a difference.
Got it.
I mean, a happy employee could be somebody who gets a 15 or 20% raise. That's not necessarily the pathway that I think makes for an amazing experience. It's an associate that has a clear understanding of what they're accountable for, a clear understanding of the decisions that they're able to make, and frankly, a little bit of autonomy to bring their personality to bear. Because again, in the spirit of making a difference, I think associates in any organization want to feel that they're doing a great job.
Awesome. So you're at Pearle Vision, and you've had some really mind-boggling success, which includes 2 Effie wins. Can you tell us a little bit about what the organization has been doing and what you've achieved?
So thank you. I'm super proud of the recognition that we've generated, not only because it's nice to have a pretty cool looking trophy on your shelf, but for us, those Effies were in the category of healthcare services, which if you had talked to anybody about Pearle Vision 5 or 6 years ago, they would have never seen Pearle as a healthcare services business. Last night, I happened to be in New York City to receive a Clio Award for our new equity campaign. And again, if you were to ask somebody 5 or 6 years ago, would Pearle ever be honored for its creative ingenuity? The answer would be no way. I think the success that comes from Pearle, or that comes from what we're doing at Pearle, begins and ends with a real drive to be consistently consistent. There is a overarching belief that you have to pivot as a brand to meet the ever-changing needs of a consumer. While the intent of that statement is absolutely true, your brand is never stagnant. The North Star of your brand should remain relatively consistent. Marketing is about positioning. Positioning is about the art of sacrifice. The art of sacrifice really says to an organization, what are you going to stand for? What are you going to win at? And for Pearle, the North Star is the belief that we are the premier neighborhood eye care brand, one that delivers genuine eye care from a neighborhood doctor. And that really guides everything that we do, and it's allowed us to win both in our marketing, but also, and most importantly, on the floor from the exam room to the retail side.
Great. So, and I know one of the areas that you've been, and well, is this balancing the, if you will, I'll use neighborhood versus national. And that's a hard balancing act to do. So I'm curious, how does it work for you today? You've got all these local stores.
I would say marketing is very much an art and science. And so for those that are listening on the podcast, I would imagine that they're in the marketing world. And I would just say it's nice to meet you virtually, artists and scientists, because that's really what it is. You've got to find the balance between efficiency and effectiveness. And for us at Pearle, with such a neighborhood-focused business, we have locations, we have DMAs where we have 2 or 3 locations, and it would be silly and reckless to buy an entire statewide or citywide media buy for 2 outlier locations. At the same time, we have a legal and an ethical obligation to drive the profitability of our locations because we are a franchise business. And so we've been able to apply technology for good, not for evil. Geo-targeting has allowed us to be uber effective and super efficient. But we have to balance efficiency and effectiveness. We are, at the end of the day, looking to tell a story and using a number of tools, some of which live in the digital arena. We're able to really put that brand message on the brain of our target consumer really within 5 to 9 miles of every location.
Wow. How are you harnessing that complexity? I mean, it sounds complex to me.
It is.
And where are you finding the efficiencies in that go-to-market approach?
So, not to be too soundbite driven, but the complexity of our business model truly is in the simplicity of what we're trying to achieve. What we're trying to achieve is to motivate a consumer to have that epiphany moment if they don't come to it themselves, that eye care is important and that it's critical, especially as you age, that you are getting an annual eye exam. For us, the complexity requires an unbelievable team, and I am blessed to surround myself both internally and externally with top shelf talent. The famous football coach, Bo Schembechler from Michigan, Go Blue, says, the team, the team, the team, and he was right. And that wasn't just a football philosophy, it's a business philosophy. In the early stage of my career, I always thought that, I'm going to make a difference and I'm going to do it all by myself. And as I've matured in my career, as I've gotten a little bit older, as my responsibilities have increased, what I've realized is that it's a hell of a lot more fun to develop a high-performing team that wants to take the journey with you. And frankly, I, as a leader, learn a hell of a lot from those folks. So it's really about surrounding yourself with great talent and staying consistent as much as you can.
That's good. So as a CMO, one of the challenges you just discussed is balancing the need-to-haves with the nice-to-haves. And one, I'd love you to just describe what you mean by needs-to-haves versus nice-to-haves, and then describe what you mean. How do you harness that?
So I go back to what marketing is. Marketing is about positioning. Positioning is about the art of sacrifice. Unless you have Pepsi, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Burger King money, and even then to a degree, you've got to have the humility to recognize that the marketplace is becoming populated in almost every category with segmented offerings. If somebody wants an organic hamburger, they can find it. And so you've got to decide. That's a terrible analogy. I apologize. I realize as that came out, boy, that was stupid. But you've got to realize and have the humility as a brand and as a leader of a brand, what do you think you can actually be best at that's going to allow you to win? And in the case of Pearle, we could talk about the amazing frame brands that we carry. Look, we're part of the Luxottica family. Luxottica has within its portfolio easily the top 25 to 30% of the frame brands in the world, and we carry them. And that's an advantage for us. But is that as powerful to a consumer for Pearle Visions' reason to believe as really leaning into something that makes us truly distinct? And our distinction comes from being a brand that was founded by a doctor, Dr. Stanley Pearle. So it would be great to be able to talk about all the great frame brands that we carry, and we do in specific channels, but at the epicenter, the North Star of this business that drives our communication platform, that drives our operations platform, is this commitment to genuine eye care. So marketers have to make sacrifices. If you try to do everything in a 30-second spot, you're just going to get a bunch of gibberish on film that costs you a lot of money.
So true. So true. I think in today's marketing world, there's this unending pressure to continue to increase digital and big data, if you will, efforts these days. But the recent pullbacks by P&G, in particular around their digital spend, they've got this active debate with their activist investor, Nelson Peltz. What are your thoughts on all of this? I mean, it's now public for P&G in this debate of what their marketing approach looks like to investors. How do you balance these unending demand for digital and big data?
What that dialogue to me represented was a challenge that occurs when you forget the purpose of data. Data's job is to provide breadcrumbs that allow leaders like me to make decisions. Data doesn't make decisions. Data informs decision making. But go back a few minutes to the discussion about marketing being an art and a science. The science comes from big data, and let's face it, big data requires that you ask the right question and that you're as thoughtful in the questions that you ask as the analysis that you do. But there has to be an art to marketing, and I'm not talking about the beautiful imagery. I am talking about getting out of the boardroom and being an Avon lady, working in Victoria's Secret, working in a Pearle Vision. If you're going to represent and lead those brands, you better have a guttural instinct as to what your consumer thinks and how they interact with your product or service. Or else, honestly, your entire decision-making tree is going to be a series of crosstabs, which then open up a huge can of worms, because if you don't have smart analysts that can storytell, that can craft a narrative, because data is only as good as the narrative that comes from it, then you're just left with a boatload of numbers on a page that mean nothing. I think what this era of big data, at least for me, is reminding myself every day, is not to lose the thing that existed before big data was around, which is that guttural feel, that instinctual feel, that in-touch feel with your consumer and your brand experience. You combine a real pragmatic understanding of what happens when people buy your product and service or interact with your product or service people, combined with big data, man, you are a rock star in the making. And I think for us at Pearle, we've been able to use data for good, not for evil, to help us inform some really smart decisions that are paying off.
I think that's really smart. I think it's really smart. I was just talking to Byron Sharp. I don't know if you know that name. He wrote the book How Brands Grow. He's an academic in Australia, but does a lot of business around the world. Big believer in science. I mean, huge believer in defining new marketing laws is what he calls them, the laws of marketing. But when we switched the conversation to talk about the future of marketing, I think it was right in line with what you're talking about, which is, he said the future belongs to the thinking marketers, not the doers. And I think, as you made it clear, data doesn't make decisions. Marketers and business people make decisions. And I think that's where the thinking marketers lie. I think that's hugely smart takeaway.
You look at even at sports, you look at a successful quarterback. What makes Tom Brady the greatest of all times, what makes him so talented is, the guy's been in the film room and he's studied film. But when he's on the field and he sees something break down, his ability to react, his ability to also instinctually predict what's going to happen is influenced by the film that he sees. That's the data. But he also has a feel for the game. He can sense where things are going. He's looking at the eyes of the guys across the line of scrimmage and can actually see in their eyes what they're going to do. That comes from experience. How many first-round draft picks at the position of quarterback, which I kind of think is what a marketer is a quarterback who's got to drive their brand down the field. And the scoring analogy would really be getting that consumer to buy or use your service or buy your product. How many great quarterbacks on paper flame out? And that's because they don't have a feel for the game. And I think marketers cannot lose that feel. Granted, I spent a lot of time in the film room, but I would not be, I hope, the person that I am now without really being able to know what the marketplace is going to do from being in the marketplace.
Well, so if marketing is ultimately, we've talked about this balance of science and art, how do you think we should be using storytelling today? How do you use it?
If marketers are artists and scientists, then our output are amazing stories. Those stories have to inform on a rational level, but motivate on an emotional level. I think storytelling is, as you're putting together a marketing plan or approach, each and every facet of that plan should contribute to the story, to the narrative. I use the phrase narrative a lot, the word narrative a lot with our agencies when we're going through plan development. I use it with our teams when we're reviewing decks. I think it's the one thing that they do not teach in college or grad school is how to write a page in PowerPoint that delivers a narrative. The story that you want to tell as a brand comes together through the channels that you use and frankly from the data that you process, and that data both lives on a piece of paper as well as in the locations as we talked about. The story at the end of the day is what the consumer is going to take away, what you want them to believe. And so I use the story as a means for keeping marketing as pure as one possibly could, knowing that our number one job in marketing is to drive action. And we drive that action through telling effective stories that resonate emotionally and motivate rationally.
Well, you talked about being in the film room. I'm going to pivot a little bit and ask you, what brands, besides Pearle Vision, of course, but what brands or companies, maybe even causes, do you think are others should be taking notice of or that you follow and look to?
I'm going to stay with sports. I actually look at the NFL as a brand. I go back to, one of my inspirations as a marketer was Pete Rozelle. When you read about him, he was the one that launched this, that created the Super Bowl, because he recognized that sports was also about entertainment. It was putting people into an environment for 3 or 4 hours where they could get lost and root for their favorite team and watch the gladiators of their choice duel it out. I actually watch the NFL, the way in which they handle their brand and their franchisees. Every NFL team is a franchise, not dissimilar to how every Pearle Vision location that we have is a franchise. And so I watch that brand very, very carefully. I'm also watching, but from a different perspective, what Apple is doing. I firmly believe, and again, it's one person's perspective, so for the listeners, feel free to disagree with me, that when you are the number one brand in a category, you have to think and behave like you are the number 3 brand, or you will end up becoming number 2 very, very quickly. I watch Apple with what they do, and I look at it with a bit of reverence, but I also look at it with a bit of, wow, that's a brand that perhaps is drinking too much of its own Kool-Aid. The humility to recognize that, yes, the iPhone when it launched was a game breaker, and you pretty much could put it on a egg crate and sell it, which essentially was what the Apple retail store was just seriously some tables with some product on it. Because you had true innovation, people went there. I think now they have got to have a little bit more humility to recognize that the Galaxies, when they're not blowing up in your hands, the Google phones, the competition has taken notice and has adjusted their product scheme where the point of differentiation between what they are and what the competition is shrinking rapidly. And so it's wonderful to be a brand like Apple with the awareness and the positivity that comes with it. But I would love to see them embrace a little bit more of that humility to recognize that they still have to work pretty damn hard to continue to embrace their consumers and remain loyal the way that they have been in the last decade.
It's a long way down from the top of that cash pile that they sit on, to see the ground, to see the earth.
Yeah, the apple tastes great when you take the first bite, but you leave that apple on the table for a little while and you don't take care of it, and pretty sure it gets pretty rotten. Their brand is far from rotten, don't get me wrong. But yeah. I would love to see a little bit more aggressiveness come out of them in terms of the way in which they tell their story.
Wow, that's good. It's a good thought. Last question for you. What do you think the future of marketing holds?
Oh, wow. I think the epic battle between the art and science of marketing will continue to intensify. The more data becomes available, the less likely people are to make a decision against what the data is showing. I love data, but I also love to ask the question, what is the data not telling me? When I look at a third-party research report, the first thing I ask for are the questions, because I could tell you right now, it's a beautiful day here in New York, it's 72 degrees, but if I asked the question the right way, I could probably give you data to show that people would think it's freezing cold outside by the way in which I ask the questions. And that's really what data mining is. Look, if we learned nothing from the 2016 presidential election, it's that you have to be very careful, not only in the questions you ask, but who you ask the questions to in order to get really good data. I think there will be a constant battle between the art and science. And I think the future of marketing is really for those that are able to balance where you lean and not disregarding either of those pillars, but how you make them work in harmony. And at the end of the day, marketing is about choosing a path. There is no right way. There is a way. And that a way comes from leaders who are passionate drivers of their brand, who are evangelists for their brand, who love what they do, and frankly want to do great work that makes a difference. Put all those things together, I think that's the future of marketing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been stimulating.
No, I appreciate it, and it was a pleasure.
Marketing Today is brought to you by Atomic. Atomic focuses on unleashing the growth potential for clients we serve. Atomic is a strategic consultancy specializing in business, marketing, brand, and innovation. Our singular goal is to help you accelerate your efforts with the right mix of expertise, analysis, and creativity. Check us out at atomic.com. ATOMCK.com. Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me, with project management by Sarah Williams, audio production by Aaron Campbell, writing and editing by Kevin Greeley, social media support by Megan Woods, art and graphic design by Sarah Dell. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about the show. We love to hear from listeners at info@atomic.com. I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.